In the grim autumn of 1945, the landscape of Japan was not merely scarred by war. It was gripped by a profound, pervasive hunger. The average Japanese civilian was scraping by on fewer than 800 calories a day, a stark, almost unfathomable deficit, representing less than half of what a human body needs simply to sustain itself. Children, their faces gaunt, often chewed on sweet potato vines, extracting meager sustenance from roots and leaves. Mothers, driven by desperation, boiled sawdust, creating a thin, illusionary broth, a heartbreaking pretense of nourishment that offered little more than psychological comfort. Into this abyss of deprivation, this widespread, gnawing hunger, stepped the last people anyone in Japan would have expected to offer succor. The very soldiers they had been systematically trained to hate, the Americans. What transpired when a single American GI, in a moment of quiet, unassuming humanity, lifted a ladle of steaming fried chicken from a field kitchen, a goulash cannon, as they were called, and extended it to a trembling, emaciated little girl, didn't just fill a single aching stomach. Its impact was far more profound, far more resonant. It cracked, with an almost audible sound, the immense, seemingly impenetrable wall of enmity that had been meticulously constructed between two nations. It permitted the first tentative yet undeniably potent ray of peace to shine through, illuminating a path toward reconciliation that few at that moment could have dared to imagine. This seemingly small act, meticulously documented in its quiet, transformative power, began a psychological shift that would redefine the relationship between former adversaries. The village that didn't exist on maps. Akasawa, in the immediate aftermath of Japan's surrender, was less a village and more a mouthful of ash and ghost stories. The relentless American bombing campaigns, designed to cripple infrastructure and demoralize the populace, had meticulously erased the rail spur that once connected it to the wider world. Consequently, the only way into this desolate pocket of existence was a rutted, treacherous footpath, made even more arduous by the persistent September mud. The few houses that remained standing were skeletal, rib cages of scorched cedar, their timber charred black, offering a stark testament to the inferno that had swept through. The vast majority of structures were reduced to blackened teeth, jagged ruins silhouetted against the perpetually gray sky, a constant visual reminder of catastrophic loss. 11-year-old Hana, a wisp of a child, carried her own silent testament to the devastation. She had lost her shoes in the firebombing, a common occurrence amidst the chaos and destruction. In their place, she had fashioned crude coverings from rags, binding them tightly around her small feet. She had, out of necessity, learned to walk without sound, a skill born of the grim understanding that silence often meant survival in a world where any noise could attract unwanted attention. Every morning, with a quiet determination born of desperation, she would climb the hill overlooking the valley. From this vantage point, she would watch the Americans, these strange, imposing figures, roll their peculiar wagons into the valley below. The GIs, with a certain pragmatic humor, called these mobile kitchens goulash cannons, steel pots of immense capacity mounted robustly on the frames of jeeps. And when the wind, an impartial messenger, drifted uphill, it carried a scent that made her stomach cramp in a wholly new, almost bewildering way. It was a complex aroma, the pungent tang of grease, the sharp bite of pepper, and something else, something rich and utterly foreign that she couldn't quite name. It was chicken. Real chicken. The last time she had tasted meat, any meat at all, was on the Emperor's last birthday, almost a full year earlier. A distant, almost mythical memory in a world defined by scarcity. This daily ritual of watching, of smelling, became a quiet, almost sacred act of survival. A fragile thread connecting her to the possibility of something beyond mere existence. The soldier who didn't want to be there. Corporal James "Jamie" McAllister, A Memphis-born 22-year-old carried the indelible scars of Okinawa not just on his body, but in the deeper recesses of his psyche. He had navigated the brutal, unforgiving landscape of that campaign, a crucible of unimaginable violence, by clinging to a single, powerful promise. If he ever made it home, if he survived the relentless onslaught, he would eat biscuits until he burst. A symbolic indulgence of peace and plenty, and he would never, under any circumstances, leave the familiar, comforting embrace of Tennessee again. Instead, fate, with its characteristic irony, had intervened. He found himself voluntold, a military euphemism for being given an order that brooks no refusal, to drive a field kitchen halfway across Kyushu. His singular qualification for this unexpected assignment: he could read a map, a skill apparently beyond the grasp of his lieutenant. His orders, delivered with the terse efficiency characteristic of military directives, were deceptively simple, yet fraught with unspoken complexities. Feed the 27th Regiment, maintain impeccable hygiene within the kitchen facilities, and, most crucially, do not fraternize. The final directive, do not fraternize, hung heavy in the air, a stark counterpoint to the humanitarian crisis unfolding around them. Every morning, with the methodical rhythm of a man resigned to his duty, he fired the oil burners, the flames licking at the immense 200-pound cauldrons. He stirred the viscous, canned chicken, the metallic clang of the ladle echoing in the pre-dawn quiet. And every morning he tried, with increasing difficulty, to ignore the shadows that watched from the tree line, silent and spectral figures that seemed to materialize with the first hint of light. These were children, mostly, their eyes disproportionately large, stark pools of hunger in their small, emaciated faces, army briefings delivered with the cold, detached logic of strategic analysis, had presented starvation not as a humanitarian crisis, but as a Japanese weapon of control. The official doctrine was chillingly clear: give them nothing, maintain the deprivation, and they would eventually riot against the communists. Their desperation conveniently diverted, problem solved. It was a brutal calculus of power, devoid of empathy. But the shadows kept creeping closer, a silent, persistent reproach to the official narrative. And the smell, the rich, savory aroma of the fried chicken, kept drifting uphill, a tantalizing, almost cruel promise of sustenance that defied the logic of war and policy, burrowing into Jamie's conscience with increasing insistence. The mathematics of restraint, so carefully articulated in regulations, were beginning to confront the undeniable reality of human suffering. And in that confrontation, a different kind of calculus was beginning to emerge. The first step down the hill. On that third Thursday of October, the sky itself seemed to mirror the somber mood of the land. The clouds hung so low, so heavy, that a persistent drizzle permeated everything, causing the pot lids in the field kitchen to hiss softly, a constant, almost melancholic soundtrack to the morning. Hannah's mother, her face etched with the lines of chronic worry and deprivation, pressed a dented tin cup into her daughter's small, trembling hand. Her voice, a mere whisper, was thick with a desperation that Hannah understood intuitively. "Bring back whatever they give you," she instructed, her eyes pleading. "We will divide it 4 ways." The unspoken context, the agonizing reality of their existence, was made manifest in the suffering of Hannah's little brother, who had cried all night, his tongue swollen and raw from the severe lack of salt in his meager diet, a common and agonizing symptom of malnutrition. Hannah stepped onto the path, her makeshift rag shoes offering little protection against the cold, damp earth. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a taiko drum, a frantic primal rhythm of fear and fragile hope. Halfway down the treacherous slope, a wave of doubt, a surge of ingrained terror, almost compelled her to turn back. Propaganda posters, remnants of a war that had supposedly ended, still flapped defiantly on the charred walls of ruined buildings. Their stark, crude warnings, emblazoned in bold, stark kanji, screamed a chilling message. "Americans will devour your babies." The images, burned into her young mind, depicted monstrous, grotesque caricatures of American soldiers, fanged and predatory. Yet, stronger than this deeply ingrained fear, stronger than the visceral memory of wartime atrocities, was the smell. The rich, intoxicating aroma of the chicken, now far more potent, pulled her forward, an irresistible force against the gravity of fear. At the edge of the American camp, she crouched low behind a stack of fuel cans, their metallic surfaces cool against her cheek. From this concealed vantage point, she watched. The soldiers moved with the languid, almost complacent rhythm of men who had the profound luxury of enough to eat, their movements unhurried, their faces unburdened by the constant gnawing of hunger. One of them, a lanky figure with sleeves rolled high to reveal muscular forearms, his skin dotted with freckles like cinnamon on dough, sang softly under his breath as he scraped the griddle, a sound of mundane domesticity utterly out of place in the war-torn landscape. The contrast was stark, almost unbearable. Hannah's knees, weakened by hunger and fear, suddenly buckled beneath her. She pitched forward, a small, involuntary cry escaping her lips, and the dented tin cup, her family's vessel of hope, clattered loudly across the gravel, its sound echoing starkly in the otherwise quiet morning air. The moment of concealment was over. The silent observer was now undeniably observed. The ladled moment. The metallic clatter of the tin cup on the gravel ripped through the morning quiet, an abrupt, jarring sound that instantly shattered the illusion of normalcy. Jamie, his instincts honed by months of combat, spun around. The heavy ladle he had been using now raised defensively, almost like a weapon. In the fraction of a second that followed, a dozen combat scenarios, honed by the brutal realities of Okinawa, flashed through his mind. A booby-trapped child, a diversionary tactic for a larger attack, an ambush waiting in the tree line. His training screamed danger. Then he saw her. She was a tiny, fragile figure, her small body testament to profound deprivation. Rags, not shoes, covered her feet. Her ribs, starkly visible, seemed to count themselves beneath her thin clothing. Her eyes, wide and dark, held a depth of fear and hunger that seemed larger than mess tin lids, reflecting a world of unimaginable suffering. She froze, a small terrified animal caught in the open. He froze, the ladle still poised, his mind grappling with the stark reality before him. In that suspended moment, the entire brutal, dehumanizing machinery of war, the vast chasm between victor and vanquished, seemed to hang precariously, balanced on that single, shared heartbeat. The silence was absolute, heavy with unspoken history. Slowly, deliberately, Jamie lowered himself, crouching down to her level, a conscious act of diffusing the perceived threat. He set the heavy ladle carefully on a nearby crate, a symbolic disarmament. Then, with a tenderness that surprised even himself, he lifted a piece of golden-brown fried chicken, still glistening with hot grease, with his bare fingers. It was too hot, of course, the heat searing his calloused skin. He juggled it instinctively, blowing on it once, then twice, the small, mundane gesture an unexpected bridge across the chasm of their difference. He then extended it forward, offering it to her. Hannah's body, driven by an instinct far more primal and immediate than conscious thought, moved before her mind could process the implications. 2 small, hesitant steps brought her within reach. She took the precious piece of meat with both hands, clutching it as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. Then, in a gesture deeply ingrained in her culture, she bowed, so low that her forehead brushed against his military boot, a profound expression of gratitude and deference. She bit down, fiercely, ravenously. Grease, a luxury she hadn't known in ages, ran down her chin, quickly followed by tears, tears of relief, of shock, of the overwhelming sensation of actual nourishment. Jamie didn't speak Japanese, the language of his former enemy, but he understood the universal language of human need. He knew, instinctively, the word for more. He gave her a second piece, then a third, until the dented tin cup she clutched was brimming with the precious, life-giving food. Only when she began to back away, bowing again and again, her small body eloquent in its gratitude, did he notice his own hands were shaking. Not from danger, not from the lingering adrenaline of a potential threat, but from the sudden, overwhelming weight of a profound realization. Enemies, stripped of their uniforms and propaganda, were simply people. Just people, capable of immense suffering and immense gratitude. It was a truth that resonated deeper than any military briefing, a truth discovered in a single ladled moment. Word travels faster than hunger. The peculiar telepathy of children, particularly when the potent aroma of food is involved, is a phenomenon that defies conventional explanation. By twilight, as the last vestiges of daylight bled from the sky, the field kitchen was not just surrounded, but ringed by a silent, expectant multitude. 30 children, their eyes mirroring the same profound hunger that had driven Hannah to the tree line earlier that day. Jamie, acutely aware of the strict non-fraternization rules, looked anxiously at his sergeant, bracing himself for the inevitable reprimand. The stern lecture about military discipline and the maintenance of order. Instead, the older man, a grizzled veteran whose face held the wisdom of countless campaigns, merely scratched his chin, a slow, deliberate gesture. He muttered, almost to himself, with a weary but resigned pragmatism, "Hell, it's October. The war's been over 6 weeks. What's the worst that can happen now?" Then, with a decisive nod, he looked Jamie squarely in the eye. "Dish it out, Corporal. I'll square it upstairs." It was an unspoken acknowledgement that some rules, in the face of such overwhelming human need, were meant to be bent, if not broken entirely. The sergeant, perhaps recalling his own children, or perhaps simply recognizing the futility of turning away such profound desperation, made a choice that would echo far beyond the confines of that temporary camp. They ran out of chicken at 2100 hours, the last savory morsel distributed to a grateful, silent recipient. But the need persisted, relentless and unyielding. Without hesitation, they switched to Spam and beans, adapting their meager supplies to meet the burgeoning demand. By midnight, the makeshift soup line had served an astonishing 312 civilians, a testament to the sheer scale of the hunger and the unexpected generosity of their former adversaries. Hannah, her small stomach now satisfied, returned the next dawn, no longer alone. This time, she held her little brother's hand, a gesture of quiet triumph and newfound security. Jamie met them with a broad, genuine grin, a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and a nickname he didn't know would stick. A small, endearing mispronunciation. "Miss Cana?" he tried, the unfamiliar syllables sounding clumsy on his tongue. She giggled, a bright, uninhibited sound of pure joy. It was close enough. In the space between the sizzling griddle and the silent tree line, something profound was rewriting itself. The formal, rigid bow of deference began to transform into the tentative, almost awkward handshake of nascent friendship. Suspicion, a deeply ingrained survival mechanism, slowly began to give way to shy, uncertain smiles. It was a quiet, organic renegotiation of human interaction, initiated not by treaties or diplomats, but by the simple, undeniable act of sharing a meal. The transformation, subtle but powerful, was underway. The officer who saw a bigger picture. Major Evelyn Hart, a dietitian commissioned from St. Louis, a woman whose professional life had been meticulously structured around nutrition and public health, arrived for her inspection 2 days later. Her expectations, Informed by military briefings and the grim realities of post-war occupation, were clear. She anticipated finding the telltale signs of black market hustle, the illicit bartering of military rations for personal gain, a common and often unavoidable byproduct of scarcity and power differentials. What she discovered instead profoundly challenged her preconceived notions. She found not a clandestine operation, but a scene of astonishing, almost surreal domesticity. A town's worth of children, their faces no longer gaunt with the terror of starvation, but alight with a fragile hope, were seated, remarkably, on repurposed ammo crates. They slurped soup, the rhythmic sound a symphony of contentment, as if it were Christmas morning, an occasion of unbridled joy and abundance. The contrast between the setting, a military camp in a war-torn land, and the palpable sense of peace and gratitude was jarring, deeply moving. Major Hart, a woman of regulations and protocols, possessed every right, every justification to shut it down. The do not fraternize order was still technically in effect, its strictures absolute. But as she observed the scene, her gaze fell upon the children, their small, eager faces. A memory, potent and immediate, surfaced from the depths of her own life. The photo of her daughter, tucked securely in her notebook, a cherished relic from home. The same gap-toothed grin, the same uninhibited joy that she now saw reflected in the faces of these Japanese children. In that moment, the sterile logic of regulations gave way to the profound, undeniable call of shared humanity. With a newfound clarity of purpose, she radioed headquarters, her voice precise, her request carefully framed within military lexicon. Request supply requisition, category humanitarian relief, population 1-200, rationale prevention civil unrest. The rationale, while technically true, artfully concealed the deeper, more empathetic motivation. The reply, to her astonishment, came back faster than any field order she had ever seen, bypassing layers of bureaucracy. Approved. Send photos. It was an implicit acknowledgement that headquarters, too, was grappling with the shifting landscape of post-war realities, recognizing the immense, untapped potential of soft power. Major Hart, now armed with a new mission, snapped pictures with a sense of urgency and purpose. She captured Hana, her small face radiant, holding a biscuit as if it were a priceless trophy. She photographed Jamie, his expression softened by an unfamiliar tenderness, pouring cocoa into a waiting cup. She documented an old woman, her face a roadmap of suffering and survival, openly weeping as she clutched a bowl of rice, the simple act of receiving food, an overwhelming emotional release. These poignant, unvarnished photographs, far more eloquent than any official report, would later tour stateside fund drives, becoming powerful symbols of reconciliation. They would headline campaigns under the evocative banner, "The Kitchen That Won Peace," effectively reframing the narrative of occupation from one of brute force to one of compassionate outreach. The strategic implications, the profound psychological transformation initiated by these images, were just beginning to be understood. When the chicken ran out. The brutal reality of military logistics, the finite nature of even the most abundant supplies, dictated that canned goods, however plentiful they seemed, could only hold so many miracles. By early November, the strategic imperative shifted, and the 27th Regiment received orders to roll north, their destination the sprawling, war-ravaged metropolis of Tokyo. The field kitchens, the very source of so much unexpected hope and sustenance, were packed up, their massive cauldrons now empty, their oil burners cold. The engines of the jeeps and trucks growled to life, a low, mechanical lament that signaled an end to this brief, transformative interlude. In a final, poignant gesture, Jamie, his heart heavy with the impending departure, tied his last 2 tins of Spam, precious commodities in a world of scarcity, into a towel. He handed them to Hana, his eyes conveying a message that words could not. "For the road," he said, the phrase carrying a double meaning. It was for her journey through continued hardship, but also implicitly for his own journey away from this place and these people who had so unexpectedly touched his soul. She answered him with the only English she had learned, a phrase imbued with a profound gratitude that transcended mere translation. "Thank you, soldier son." It was a small, quiet farewell, laden with unspoken emotion. They never exchanged letters. The immense, seemingly unbridgeable chasm of the enemy language gap, coupled with the complexities of military mail and civilian communication in a shattered nation, ensured that, yet, for decades, each of them kept a single, cherished relic, a tangible link to that brief, transformative encounter. Hannah, in a testament to resilience and adaptation, repurposed the empty Spam tin. It became a flower pot, nurturing new life, a vibrant symbol of hope and growth from the ashes of war and hunger. Jamie, back in the comforting, if somewhat mundane landscape of Tennessee, kept the dented tin cup. The dent, a memory of its fall, had been carefully hammered smooth, a quiet act of preservation. It held loose change on his dresser, a daily, subtle reminder of a moment that had irrevocably altered his perception of the world. These were small things, unassuming objects in the grand sweep of history, but they were large enough, potent enough, to serve as enduring reminders to both of them that the very first, fragile seed of an alliance, a profound connection between former enemies, could indeed fit, quite literally, inside a child's hungry stomach. The psychological transformation for both was permanent, from ladle to legislation. Back home, far from the war-torn villages of Kyushu, Major Hart's poignant photographs of Hannah, Jamie, and the grateful civilians transcended mere imagery. Editors, recognizing their immense emotional power and their capacity to reshape public perception, splashed them across the Sunday supplements of newspapers nationwide. These images, depicting raw human connection amidst the ruins of war, resonated deeply with an American public weary of conflict but eager for stories of hope and redemption. Congress, ever attuned to the shifting currents of public sentiment, and sensing that goodwill could be cultivated far more cheaply than maintaining a vast occupation force, acted decisively. They appropriated surplus dried milk, a bounty of American agricultural production, along with wheat and canned meat. This was not merely charity. It was a strategically astute investment in the future of international relations. By 1947, this burgeoning relief effort had formalized into a program of significant national scope, acquiring a name that would become synonymous with childhood nourishment and post-war reconstruction. The School Lunch Program. Japanese principals, in villages and cities alike, began to receive massive shipments of these vital supplies. Each package, each crate, bore a label that carried immense symbolic weight. Gift of the American people. Children, many of whom had known only deprivation, learned the simple yet profound pleasure of drinking cold milk, a novel taste and texture for many. They puzzled over the creamy, unfamiliar texture of peanut butter, a distinctly American culinary introduction. The nutritional impact was almost immediate and undeniably profound. Records meticulously confirm that, within a single year, Japanese children, benefiting from this sustained nourishment, grew an average of 2 inches, a tangible, measurable testament to the program's effectiveness. In the meticulously revised textbooks that began to appear in Japanese schools, the chapter on the war, a brutal and devastating period, no longer ended solely with the somber imagery of surrender on the USS Missouri. It concluded instead with the hopeful, reassuring sounds of trays clattering in Tokyo lunchrooms, a powerful visual and auditory metaphor for peace and renewal. Visiting American senators, keen to document the success of their nation's foreign policy, posed for photos with beaming Japanese schoolchildren. They bit into fluffy white bread, a symbol of American abundance, and declared it, with a flourish, the best diplomacy tax dollars can buy. The policy wonks, the strategists in Washington, labeled it soft power, a sophisticated geopolitical instrument. The children, however, with their innate ability to distill complex realities to their simplest truths, just called it lunch. It was a profound, systematic psychological transformation implemented on a national scale. The reunion. No one planned. Fast forward to 1964. Tokyo, the city, having risen phoenix-like from the ashes of war, was now ablaze with the vibrant, celebratory spirit of the Olympic Games, a global spectacle of athletic prowess and international cooperation. Jamie, now a trucking foreman back in Tennessee, a life largely defined by the steady rhythm of highways and cargo, had saved for 3 arduous years to afford the trip. He carried the dented tin cup, his silent, enduring relic, in his jacket pocket. He wasn't entirely sure why. A profound, almost subconscious pull drawing him back to a moment that had shaped his life. Outside the sprawling Olympic Stadium, amidst the swirling, kaleidoscopic throng of international visitors and eager spectators, he found himself momentarily lost, a solitary figure adrift in a sea of faces. Then, a voice, carefully modulated, speaking in surprisingly clear English, cut through the din. "You share chicken?" The question, so simple yet so deeply resonant, stopped him dead in his tracks. There she stood, Hannah. No longer the terrified, starving child, but a woman, poised and dignified, dressed in a nurse's uniform, a testament to a life rebuilt and dedicated to healing. The same wide, luminous eyes, though now they held not hunger, but a profound, almost overwhelming recognition. She bowed, a gesture of deep respect. Then, in a cascade of raw emotion, she broke into tears, tears of memory and gratitude, which quickly gave way to the joyous, uninhibited sound of laughter. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated human connection, spanning decades and continents. A keen-eyed reporter, ever vigilant for stories of human interest, caught the spontaneous reunion. The photograph, capturing the raw emotion of that unexpected encounter, ran in newspapers in both countries, instantly becoming an iconic image. The headline, stark and powerful, resonated across cultures. Enemies no more. That night they ate yakitori, grilled chicken skewers, a national delicacy. Chicken again, but this time it was shared not out of desperation, but celebration. They sat side by side. No uniforms, no rations, no imposed divisions. Just 2 adults, former adversaries, tasting what peace actually meant in its most profound, simplest form, the salty tang of memory, the smoky aroma of shared experience, and the quiet, profound ability to share without counting pieces, without fear, without reservation. The psychological arc of reconciliation, initiated by a ladle, had found its powerful emotional conclusion. Why fried chicken mattered. In the cultural tapestry of America, fried chicken occupies a cherished, almost iconic, place as the quintessential comfort food, a symbol of home, warmth, and culinary indulgence. In wartime Japan, however, particularly in the desperate aftermath of surrender, the very concept of chicken was mythical, an almost unattainable dream. Few, if any, had tasted it in years, its existence relegated to the realm of distant memory or vivid imagination. The specific act of frying, beyond merely cooking, proved to be a critical element in its transformative power. Frying, with its distinct, pervasive aroma, made the smell travel, an undeniable universal invitation that transcended language barriers and cultural divides. The audible crunch of the crispy skin, a sound of profound satisfaction, announced plenty, a stark contrast to the hollow emptiness of chronic hunger. The rich, almost unctuous grease, a source of vital calories and fat, whispered promises of survival. of sustained life. Psychologists, in later academic papers meticulously analyzing the profound impact of shared meals, would articulate the scientific basis for this phenomenon. They theorized that shared meals trigger mirror neurons, those remarkable brain cells that fire both when an individual acts and when they observe the same action performed by another. This neurological mechanism, they argued, facilitates empathy in a deeply visceral, chewable form. The act of eating together, particularly in a context of shared vulnerability, creates a powerful bond, dissolving barriers and fostering connection. But one doesn't need peer-reviewed journals or complex neurological explanations to grasp this fundamental truth. Ask any soldier, any veteran, what he remembers most vividly after a grueling patrol, after the chaos and terror of combat, and he will, almost invariably, tell you not about the strategic maneuvers or the tactical objectives, but about the smell of the mess tent, the camaraderie of a shared meal, the brief respite from the relentless demands of war. Ask any child, rescued from the brink of starvation by these seemingly monstrous GIs, what convinced them that the monsters were, in fact, human, and they will recount, with crystalline clarity, the moment someone bigger, someone feared, handed them food without asking for anything in return. The fried chicken, in this profound historical moment, was merely the delivery system, the humble vehicle for a much larger, far more significant payload. The payload, in its essence, was dignity. It was the restoration of humanity, one piece of chicken at a time. The psychological impact, the shift from dehumanization to recognition, was immediate and profound. The ripple. No one measured. Economists, with their meticulous charts and graphs, find solace and meaning in the quantifiable metrics of GDP, in the ebb and flow of national prosperity. But how, one might ask, do you graph the almost immeasurable yet undeniably profound impact of a little girl who stops fearing? How do you quantify the transformation from terror to tentative trust? Hannah, that small, trembling figure at the tree line, grew up, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to understand the world that had so dramatically intersected with her own. She taught herself English, meticulously poring over discarded occupation newspapers, deciphering their foreign script. This self-taught linguistic proficiency, coupled with her innate intelligence and resilience, led her to a distinguished career. She became the head nurse in a bustling Yokohama clinic, a testament to her dedication and her profound capacity for healing. Every August, with unwavering commitment, she volunteers for peace camps, sharing her story, her living history, with new generations. She tells the children, her voice imbued with the quiet authority of experience, "I once feared ghosts. Now I grill chicken with them." It is a powerful, concise encapsulation of her journey from profound fear to active reconciliation. Now, multiply that single, transformative experience by thousands. Consider the countless other Japanese citizens, nurses, engineers, artists, teachers, who tasted American Spam, who were offered American cocoa, and who, in those simple acts of shared humanity, fundamentally altered their perception. They decided, in the quiet recesses of their hearts, that these foreigners, these former enemies, were not the ogres of wartime propaganda, but complex, multifaceted human beings. The enduring alliance that followed, a strategic partnership that has shaped the geopolitical landscape of the Pacific, finds its genesis in these micro-moments. Security treaties, meticulously negotiated and signed, massive trade pacts, fostering economic interdependence, even the vibrant, cross-cultural phenomenon of anime conventions flourishing in places like Memphis, all of these, in their own way, trace their lineage back to a single ladle, a single shared meal. Historians, in their grand narratives, often argue about the sweeping influence of macro forces, the vast, impersonal currents of politics and economics. But the rest of us, those who understand the profound power of individual connection, Know with an intuitive certainty that it is these micro moments, these seemingly insignificant acts of kindness, that ultimately tilt the world, shifting its axis toward peace and mutual understanding. The psychological legacy of that shared meal became a foundational element of a new international reality. What Jamie took home. Jamie, despite his solemn promise to himself on Okinawa, never quite made it back to the singular pursuit of Tennessee biscuits. Life, with its unpredictable currents, had other plans for him. He stayed in the reserves, maintaining a connection to the military, perhaps a subconscious acknowledgement of the profound impact it had had on his life. For 40 years he drove trucks, the open road a familiar companion, the steady rhythm of his work a stark contrast to the chaos of war. He coached Little League, his voice echoing across dusty baseball fields, shaping young lives with lessons learned far from home. And to new recruits, to young men and women embarking on their own military journeys, he offered a piece of hard-won wisdom, a distillation of his own transformative experience. Feed people first, questions later. It was a philosophy born of profound insight, a recognition that basic human needs often superseded bureaucratic protocols. When his grandson, with the innocent curiosity of youth, asked him why he kept a rusty tin cup, an unassuming artifact amidst the more conventional mementos of a life well lived, Jamie's answer was concise, yet deeply profound. "Peace," he explained, his voice imbued with the weight of memory, "fits in odd containers." It was a poetic testament to the unexpected places where true reconciliation can be found. After he passed, his family, understanding the quiet significance of the object, donated the cup to a small, unassuming museum nestled outside Nagasaki. There, under the protective gaze of glass, it sits, a humble yet powerful exhibit. Beside it, thoughtfully arranged, are a child's rag shoes, a silent, poignant counterpoint to the cup, a tangible representation of the hunger and desperation it had once helped alleviate. Visitors lean in, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and reverence, to read the accompanying placard. Its simple inscription, a testament to enduring truth, reads, "Shared meal, shared future." Some visitors, moved by the story, leave delicate origami cranes, symbols of peace and hope. Others, perhaps with a touch of modern irony, leave KFC coupons, a contemporary homage to the very food that sparked such profound change. Both, in their own unique ways, are correct offerings, acknowledging the enduring legacy of a moment when the simple act of sharing transcended the vast chasm of war, initiating a psychological shift that would resonate for generations. The lesson schools still teach. In the meticulously structured and deeply respectful culture of Japan, the echoes of that post-war transformation continue to resonate, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Japanese school lunchrooms, precise and orderly, begin every single meal with a ritualistic bow. It is a quiet, collective gesture, directed not at the teachers or the lunch monitors, but toward the kitchen, a silent, profound thank you to unseen hands, to the anonymous individuals who prepared their nourishment. This seemingly simple ritual, enacted daily by millions of schoolchildren, carries with it a rich, deeply embedded history. Teachers, understanding the importance of historical context, explain the origin of this practice. They recount the story of post-war relief, of the desperate times when powdered milk, often mixed with rice, was a precious commodity, a lifeline. They speak of the day chicken arrived, a symbol of hope and abundance, a tangible manifestation of kindness from an unexpected source. Kids, with the characteristic impatience of youth, nod along, perhaps more interested in the promise of dessert than the intricacies of history. Yet, the ritual sticks. It embeds itself in their young minds, becoming an indelible part of their cultural DNA. When these children grow up and travel, when they venture beyond the familiar shores of Japan, The lessons learned in those lunchrooms subtly guide their interactions. They remember to bow, a gesture of respect that transcends linguistic barriers. They remember to share, a fundamental principle of community and empathy. They learn, perhaps unconsciously, to offer food before offering opinion, a recognition that basic human connection often precedes intellectual debate. It is how a nation once tragically synonymous with the kamikaze, with the fierce, unyielding spirit of wartime sacrifice, became, over decades of patient rebuilding and reconciliation, synonymous instead with katsu, a beloved culinary staple, and with a profound, almost innate, courtesy. All because, in a moment of profound clarity and unexpected humanity, someone decided that hunger, in its raw, pervasive form, was a far bigger, far more immediate enemy than any flag, any ideology, or any perceived national difference. The systematic psychological transformation of a nation, quietly enacted, had taken root. Your kitchen. Your seed. You don't need a field cannon, a massive, mobile kitchen designed for military logistics, to change the world. The grand narratives of history often focus on monumental events, on treaties signed and battles won. But the true, enduring transformations, the quiet revolutions of the human heart, often begin with far simpler, far more accessible acts. A casserole, lovingly prepared and delivered to a neighbor in need, a gesture of communal support. Groceries, thoughtfully left on a doorstep for someone struggling, an anonymous act of compassion. Even the extra sandwich, a small surplus, handed across a cubicle to a colleague who forgot their lunch. These, in their own contemporary way, are our modern goulash cannons. They are the vehicles of connection, the instruments of unexpected grace. The soldier in this story, Corporal Jamie McAllister, wore khakis, the distinctive uniform of the American military. But the uniform, the specific identifier of affiliation, isn't required for acts of profound human connection. The child, Hannah, that recipient of unexpected kindness, could be anyone. She could be anyone outside your immediate comfort zone, anyone you might, consciously or unconsciously, perceive as other. Next time you catch yourself thinking, even for a fleeting moment, "those people," a phrase laden with subtle judgment and implicit division, remember the potent, transformative power of the smell of chicken. Remember how it drifted uphill, an irresistible aroma that transcended fear and hatred. Remember how it turned a foe, an enemy defined by propaganda and conflict, into a friend, a fellow human being, before either could even pronounce the other's name correctly. Before the complexities of language could erect new barriers, the systematic psychological shift, the dismantling of perceived difference, often begins with such simple sensory experiences. 100 words to take with you. In the crucible of 1945, a single ladle of fried chicken, offered with quiet courage, bridged the immense chasm between two warring nations. In 2025, in our own complex, often divided world, a shared lunch, a simple meal offered with open hands and an open heart, can still bridge two hearts, two souls. Hunger isn't always for calories. Sometimes it's a deeper, more profound yearning. A hunger for knowing we are seen, that we are recognized as human. When we feed strangers, when we extend that unexpected act of kindness, we confess a simple, yet powerful truth. The line that ostensibly divides us, the perceived chasm of difference, is often far thinner, far more permeable, than the broth in a shared cup. So, the next time you smell something good cooking, something rich and inviting, look around. Someone, somewhere, might be hovering at the metaphorical edge of your camp, hesitant, hungry for connection. Offer a piece. Let them bow, or nod, or simply chew in silence. That's how wars, both grand and personal, truly end. Not with meticulously drafted treaties, but with the soft, almost inaudible clinking of tin cups against ladles of mercy. If this story warmed you even half as much as that chicken warmed Hannah and those children, hit like, share it with a friend who needs hope, and drop a comment telling us the best meal you ever shared. Because every good story, every profound transformation starts with food and the quiet courage to offer it.